what design is?
You're not going to believe this, but maybe you will. It was on the first day of when I was at Uni SA, so that's shout out to my university in Adelaide. First day as an interior designer, the lecturer was talking about what interior design is, and I knew I belonged there. And I selected my master. At the time, I thought I was going to do master by research only, not PhD. So I knew exactly what I wanted to become. I wanted to become an academic, and I selected my master topic.
Incredible.
On the first day.
Day
first
one.
hour, yeah.
And you followed through with that topic?
I followed through with that topic, so I was really strategic. Even then, I had design strategy in my head. I was really strategic about all the studios that I selected after that to feed into my Master of Design.
That's awesome. And I actually love hearing these stories because certainly for me, architecture was something I knew from day dot, and that's what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And often I think it's so important to share these moments of, sometimes be open-minded and try things. And sometimes you need to listen to that voice within you that says, this is mine.
100%. It's a calling.
Yeah.
It's your intuition talking to you and saying, this is where you belong. That's where you're talented. And you should follow through. But the first year was a struggle because, as you know, some students get it just like that. Some students take them a while to get it. I got it in second year. When I did it was a studio for a set design, and I knew that I wanted to become a set designer. That was it. So if you don't know how to draw in architecture or interior design, you will struggle because you won't be able to express your ideas freely. So that was my weak point at the time, the second year. And I practiced the whole night just to make sure that I can draw. And I started getting it slowly, bit by bit. That was the design switch on. You just have to let go of the doubt, of the fear, and just listen to your innovation's voice.
Just listen to your voice, listen to your innovation. That's so important for listeners to hear, I think. Such an important message to be sharing.
Yeah.
I want to circle back to your point. You knew straight away you wanted to be an academic, a researcher. How did you know most people want to be in practice and do glamorous projects? And
I think it wasn't so much academia, it was the action that was happening around me. So the lecturer was really inspiring at the time. I thought I wanted to be able to explain and talk about design like them. And it was the topic, the purpose why I wanted to become an academic is I wanted to research the topic that I chose in that first hour. I wanted to look into the reconstruction of cities and community resilience. And that's why I chose the research, but not the profession.
yeah,
And the action of the lecturer, but not the profession itself.
you chose the methodology, not the outcome.
Yeah. Nice. The process. It was
It was about the process.
It was about the process, yeah. Designing my life at that time.
And that's what all creative practitioners do, right? We're actually actively creating our lives and designing our lives. And anyone who makes a decision about themselves, their life and where they're going, it's an act of creativity.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But we did not have the maturity enough. I wish that we can actually teach our students that when you're designing your future or your profession, or when you're teaching you the mindset of architecture and design, we're actually teaching you how to design your own life as well, because you can be creative with that.
That's awesome. I have to sit with this idea for a moment. And, people in our industry talk about sometimes it's easy to get bogged down in how hard it can be, but we need to remember what an amazing opportunity, what power and what privilege there is to be able to have the tools of design and creation of creating our world.
It's amazing. I mean, imagine our mindset has been trained for 4 to 5 years just to innovate. What a luxury this is for us. Not many people have that in their life, to actually be trained to imagine and to use your imagination for the good of the community and for the good of your life, for you.
Absolutely. At the moment, you're applying that lens and that thinking to food technology And
Yeah.
food systems and really that reconstruction and resilience, it's around the question of effectively food scarcity, food availability, food production in cities.
Yeah.
Let us into your work and take us into your work and your research at the moment.
Well, when I started with the food innovation, I was actually in Dubai, so as you are, as you do. So my one of the partners that I used to deal with here in Australia asked me to go and lead a food design lab, research lab in France, and it's l'école de design, Nantes-Atlantique, and I did. So I did not know anything about food design at the time. So it was that when I had the interview with the director, Christian Gallarin, I even said to him, I don't know how to cook, so I'm not sure why you're asking me to do this. And he's become one of my mentors, someone I respect a lot. He gave me 2 advice. He said, this is your lab, you do whatever you want, and this is not a culinary lab, it's not a gastronomy lab. Meaning that it's a design, research, and innovation lab. So I did not know anything about it. I started with what I knew. Interior design, architecture, urban design, and created the link between food innovation and my discipline from there. Meaning that how we design our cities, how we design our interior, we're pretty much, as I was saying, designing our lives and our food systems. Where to cook, how to eat, where to eat, with whom, on the sofa, on the table, healthy, mass-produced food. All of that feeds into the built environment. And its influence, it's like Brian Masumi said, that affect is a simultaneous relationship between food systems and our built environment and cities. And this is what I'm actually researching at the moment.
And across scales, right? Both the urban scale of the whole city and perhaps urban food production as well, right? Right down, I'm interested also in that micro, that it's coming down to really that experience of eating and being in the kitchen. So you're considering the full scale there.
It's a whole system. And it's not just in Western countries, but it's also in third world countries. So you look at the entire system of food from production to manufacturing, distribution, consumption, where design sits. And then you've got the recycling. Our power as designers to influence, and as consumers to influence the food system is that in that consumption area. So what we decide to eat and how and the value of the food that we eat will determine minimizing pressure on the resources, waste, recycling. Will determine everything. It will influence the entire food system.
What do you wish more people knew about food systems?
That food is not just an act of putting ingredients in your mouth, but it's about your health and the health of the planet.
Is part of that, is there space in that for eating meat? Is that possible to consume meat ethically?
It is. I would. When I get asked this question, I usually say it's about a balanced diet. Really, if all of us decide to go and eat vegetables, we're putting pressure on the resources. So there'll be more farming and there'll be more clearing for corn, because there's as much clearing, farmland clearing for corn and avocado and coconut and pineapple and all that as there is for meat, right? Meat would be right up there because of the pollution with the livestock and because it takes more space. But what I'm trying to say is this: it's about a balanced diet. That your diet, the health of your body, is linked to the health of the planet. Meaning that if we all decide and eat insects, there's going to be pressure on insects in the future. If we all decide to go and eat meat, that would be disastrous for the planet, right? If you decide to have a balanced diet between vegetables, grains, fresh produce, in-season produce, as well. That's really important, something I've learned from living in France. Something that is not in season is not going to have the same nutritional value for your body as something that is eaten out of season. That's something I've learned. And taste of the actual produce is linked to the ingredients and the nutritions that you're having in your body as well. So if you look after yourself and eat the least mass manufactured food possible, fresh produce, balanced diet, then your health is balanced with the health of the planet.
All such very important points for our listeners and all of us to be reminded of. It's a symbiosis, right? It's an inextricable, interconnected relationship.
Yeah.
That exists between all living things, even though we try and take ourselves out of it and we think that we're different from nature or different from the animal world. We're actually still part of that.
We are 100%. And actually working around the world, I've realized that all the ancient philosophies that, they've got in Asia and in Europe, and there are reasons why you have food eaten at certain season and accompanied with certain food. Why you mix ingredients. Because it's not out of, an accident. It's actually being thought of because this is what your body needs at this time of the year, at this season, to live a healthy life. So it's a big, huge topic. I think you need more podcasts for that.
It is certainly a massive topic, but how is it for you coming from design? And I know it's the process, right? It's the process, it's the thinking is important, but still an element of adjusting your mind or adjusting your thinking to think about food.
Yeah.
How was that for you?
At the beginning, it was very difficult because you're thinking systematically, right? You're thinking I came from an Australian background where I'm thinking about food as business, as a business case, or thinking about it as a structure. And then I was reminded to think about it from a cultural perspective and a social perspective, because when you think about food in France, it's completely different to the Australian culture. Food is eaten together. It has a reason. It's eaten 4 times a day. And sometimes you've got 3-course meal. Sometimes you've got 4. And it's very structured within the day, but it also has a very cultural value and meaning to the identity of France and to individuals as well. So that was a huge challenge for me. I decided not to think about it until I've actually done enough research to respect the culture I'm in first, to respect their food culture before I embark on any research or talk to anyone.
That must have been really daunting, especially in such a strong and famous food culture.
100%. It was daunting, but I wanted to make sure that I'm not offending anyone when I'm actually talking to them, and I come from a place of knowledge. So I disappeared for a while, just letting things kind of progress. It's the process, right? Process of knowledge and innovation. I was training my mindset to become a food designer, because food design is actually a discipline in Europe since 1980s. So
how is that discipline defined?
It's defined by there are several definitions, and I'll give you some, if you like, I'll give you some links to books as well that I've published in. But I define it as a relationship between people and their natural environment.
Okay.
That's my definition of food design. It's an innovation in food products, which include systems, food systems, food and technology, minimizing food waste, protein transition, cultural identity of nations, and how you're going to be feeding the planet in the future while maintaining that cultural identity.
So important. That's the scary crux of it, right? When people say that we need to innovate, we need to adapt, we need to change everything, or we're not going to survive whatever's impending, ... All these questions of how to live a good Anthropocene. That cultural awareness and that cultural sensitivity about what food means to people and what it means to communities and what any challenge that we're facing actually means to the people, that human-centric thinking.
100%. I took like a humanity, I pushed that further to think about humanity, because when you're thinking about food systems and food design, you need to think about the entire being ecosystem. You know, if one insect disappears, it means that there's an entire ecosystem around it that's going to disappear too. That is really important for our existence. And it's not a holistic approach. It's actually a very scientific approach that you can't risk an extinction of any being on this planet. It can lead to disasters. And the cultural sensitivity, that was my key word, to approach it with respect. And before I start changing things, I needed to know what works, what already works, and what were the ancient methods that are starting to disappear, and how can I bring that back? So we look, for example, that's very similar to when we do projects in architecture. We look at the regional identity of the site. We take the materiality of the site, the access points, the light, the orientation. Very similar to food design. This is what I was actually doing. The regional identity was extremely important to preserve, and anything else I needed to change, I'm going to build onto that.
As you mentioned, this regional identity memory has come back to me of gleaning and gleaning culture in France, and that film The Gleaners by Agnes Varda. How did that come into your systems design and consideration and thinking that a really unique tradition?
You've just said the word that I love the most, which is memories.
Yeah.
You cannot separate memories from space and from culture and food. Especially when you're talking about, for example, the Madeleine Proust, known as Proust in English. You know, when you're actually, memories are extremely important in food culture in France, because when you're eating with people, always with people, you are creating memories. You are building memories. And also you've got memories, but you've got the history of gastronomy alongside that. Which creates the food identity of France, or even Mediterranean cities in general, or European cities in general. If you look at the Italian culture, it's the same.
Yeah.
You know, so the memories of a space and the food within that space, of what you're eating, with whom you're eating, is extremely important in creating even the urban identity and the urban memory.
It's inextricably interconnected, and we understand that in Melbourne through cafe culture. Definitely, it's probably the instant parallel that can be made there. It's in our laneways and our coffee.
Amazing! I'm so glad you brought this up, because Melbourne, the foodie capital of of Australia, really. It's and especially with the laneways that were created. I mean, I know that with the history of Melbourne, for example, that many of the laneways, there were textile factories, and then they've been transformed. What transformed the identity of Melbourne has been the rooftop bars and the restaurants, and we have created our own food culture with that, you know.
What lessons from France do you think are applicable to Australia?
The one that I would say the most is the appreciation of fresh food and the appreciation of healthy food, or savoring the memory of food. That would be the most lesson that we could learn. Every single ingredient needs to have the nutritional value that is good for your body, and reducing the intake of mass manufactured products, because they have high sugar or high salt ingredients in them, so that would dull down the taste. So every time you have a meal, just savor that taste and savor that memory. Just to think about your sensory experience of eating. It's not. I usually hear people say it's just food. It's not just food. It's your life.
It's your life force. It's what you put in.
It's one of our primal biological needs. And if we don't know what we're eating and enjoy that experience of eating, then I think we're going to be living a very short, memoryless life.
So it's the broader context of being called to live with intention.
Yeah. Yeah. Being present, right, with your food.
Yeah. Being present in the decisions you make in your life and the life you're designing around yourself that you're creating.
Yeah.
And the systems that it's part of.
100%. Yeah. Well said.
I'm always curious about urban farming. There's always a lot of design and speculation. It's probably a favorite topic of design studios around the world, how we're going to grow the food in our cities. Do you think that's a relevant moral panic? Do you think it's a pressing an issue as it's been elevated to be?
I think it's a valid issue that with urban farming, but if we don't, like with any other design project, if we don't take the time to really research the purpose, how many people we're going to be feeding, what are the ingredients, why have we chosen this type of ingredient, it could become projects just for project's sake, right? And it will not be enough to actually feed the entire population. I know that many attempts have been made for with mushrooms, especially with mushroom farming, because they don't take too much resources and space. But like I was mentioning before, we can't just put pressure on one ingredient. There are valid points, but I feel that at this stage, with the panicking of let's get into urban farming,
yes,
without getting all the stakeholders together, meaning government, food experts, scientists, business experts, on the one table to collaborate and understand what kind of urban farming and what are we going to grow, how many people are going to feed, it will just be waste of resources.
Can I get your take also on kelp farming? I think this was popularized in that film 2030 about looking at existing carbon drawdown technologies and how that kelp farming can bring up the cold water from the depths and cool our oceans and grow at a meter length per week. Is it the future of protein that everyone's saying?
It could be, but this is what I was actually talking about in terms of before we start looking at new technologies and before we start looking at innovating new resources, why don't we look at what we have already? For example, with the protein transition, putting so much pressure. I'll just give you a simple example, and it's not as sophisticated as the new kelp farming that we're talking about. But with the protein transition, for example, there was a project that we need to put pressure on. We need to reduce the intake of meat because livestock takes too much space and creates pollution and etc. And then we looked at some of the ancient ways of feeding the population with high protein ingredients. And I did a workshop on snails.
Wow.
in
Bit of
France.
French influence there with some escargot.
Exactly, with the escargot. And I found that the French millennials, they don't like to eat snails. They only eat them during Christmas. But that was mainly one of the reasons why snails was introduced to the French menu. And it's high in protein. It doesn't take too much room, and it's easy to harvest. And it can feed the billions at a low cost. And this is just going back into the ancient, or it's not so much ancient, but it's just going back to traditional know-how in cuisines. And I'm sure that if you look at the Asian cuisine, you're going to find that Middle Eastern, you'll find that European. So what I'm trying to say is that before we start innovating new technologies, new protein transition, new, let's look at what we have.
Yeah.
And work from there.
Yeah, go back to basics.
Go back to basics.
Go back to the original precedent. That's how all good design works, right?
Absolutely. I mean, you know that with any design project, before we embark onto it, we need to see what exists already.
Yeah.
So at the moment, I feel that with many of the food transitions and food projects that we are innovation that we're doing, we are looking towards the future without taking a step back to see what works and what doesn't, and what can we adapt. It's the aim. We have to remember that the aim is not just to feed the planet. The aim is to keep the planet healthy as well, so it keeps feeding us.
That's really important message, and an excellent insight into your thinking. And you try and share this thinking with people in workshops. You love doing workshops and programs. What are some of these workshops that you make available to people and organizations?
So far, what I've done in Australia is I have done webinars, executive education webinars. So looking into design strategies and innovation, how to implement design strategies into organizations for innovation portfolio and growth. Food, not so much, not in Australia, but I have worked with the industry overseas in France, and a little bit in China as well. We've done a project 2018 with one of the industry partners in China. It was academic and industry, where they looked at rebranding their food product. So the brand was too traditional, and the young Chinese generation were not interested in buying that brand because it had traditional branding identity. So we redesigned the entire brand to create a link between the actual site in Hangzhou and that food product. But one of the most close to my heart, I would say, workshop that I have done in China is called 5 Elements. And this workshop, I've published on it already, but it was creating a link and an awareness, community awareness between people and their environment. So there's a huge lake in Hangzhou called the West Lake, and it feeds the entire population.
Wow.
And it has a great ecosystem there. And an amazing history, of course, being in China. And the local students did not even know the significance of this lake to their food system. So I've created a workshop called 5 Elements, and it has the 5, can say the seasonal elements, or more the philosophical, ancient philosophy elements of fire and wood, and that creates the life system for the life system of the natural ecosystem in Hangzhou. And that is the closest to my heart, the workshop closest to my heart I have done.
It's again bringing people back to basics, back to their roots, back to their origin.
Yeah, the why.
Yeah.
What is the link between the 5 elements, the site, food systems, and people?
The why. That's the first question every student gets in design school, right? The why. What is your why? The famous question that gets repeated. What for you is the biggest challenge that you see over and over again organizations facing when they're about to embark on this transformation journey?
Transformation journey of food transition or strategy?
Strategy within organizations.
I think you've got different organizations. They would have different different challenges. You might actually have an organization that is too scared to grow because it doesn't want to lose this identity. I find that a lot. You might have someone that they just do not want to change because they think that we've always done it that way, which is the worst thing you can ever say in an organization.
That's a classic, isn't it?
A classic.
That's the predictable one, maybe.
Yeah. And I find that sometimes they just think that innovation only belongs to design and architecture or to the creative industries.
Or to the high tech.
But I believe that every single person is innovative if you give them the freedom to be, So the biggest challenge, and one of the biggest challenge that I find is that when the leadership ladders, they do not talk to each other and they don't share the same vision as well. So the vision gets convoluted with, the frontliners, mid-management, higher management. They just, if you speak to any of them, they would tell you a different vision. So it's not aligned. It's not unified. And that can be disastrous sometimes for organizations.
What have you been able to identify as often a common cause for some of this comms breakdown that happens?
Communication. Clear communication between all internal stakeholders. I think that would be one of the and communication, and sometimes the leadership within that organization is not very clear. No clear boundaries or no clear roles for people to take on the responsibilities. See, with the strategy, when you're talking about a strategy is a unified vision with a foresight vision and a purpose for the organization, for this organization to exist, and its impact on the community. If you don't have that within the organization, and the leadership within that organization cannot communicate that to all stakeholders and listen to their opinion, then and just not be involved too much in the operations, but at least hire people who know what they're doing within that organization, the vision will get lost really quickly.
That listening piece is so important, the act of deep listening, isn't it?
Yeah. Active listening is, you're right, yeah, absolutely.
How important would you say trust is?
In an organization, it's number one. I believe that it's number one in especially when you're doing design strategy, but it's not something that you would aim for. It's not something that I aim for in a workshop. It should come organically through your work and through your dealing with your colleagues and with management and direction. So I do not aim to actually ask them to trust their organization, because you can't do that. It's something that it should be felt.
You can't clap your hands and magically say that it's a process,
yes,
isn't it?
But it's through that workshop that you develop the trust for people to trust that they can actually voice their opinion without being judged. That judgment is a big thing as well in creating a successful project or a strategy. But I do not aim for, at the end of the workshop, I do not aim that magically people will trust their organization. It's a given that they should. That's why they're working there, right? So.
And it's not a once-off workshop. By the sounds of it, this may take multiple iterations.
Absolutely, yeah. If it depends on the complexity of what the organization would like me to do. It could be, I usually do like sprints, for example, 1 day or 2 day sprints, depending on the complexity and the aim and the goals of if they just want like an innovation workshop where the idea remains a concept, as you know, then 1 or 2 days would be fine. But if they want to implement that strategy and see long-term, goals, then they have to do several. It could take a year.
What surprised you the most about doing this sort of work and working in and amongst organizations?
What surprised me was that, it did and it didn't at the same time, the value of design.
Say more.
The value of design in, like the link between design and design management and design strategy. So they thought of design as something that is tangible, or something that to produce spaces or architecture or products, but using design as an innovation tool for design strategies in organization, that's something that usually organizations do not think that this is the traditional role of design is. And the second one is that people thought they did not know how to draw until they actually do my workshop.
You're bringing them into that formative first, second year into experience for yourself as a student, isn't it?
You've got it, yeah.
I want to pick your brain a bit also because in Soundcheck, you revealed to me that one of your first design studios actually was about early memories, and you had your students engaged in this. Tell me a bit about the design studio and why you found that in your work was a great window in.
This is actually a trick that I've learned as a student when I was at Uni Essay. So to give them credit, they always try to relate it to our early memories. So with my students, I actually do the same thing now, but I take it further, especially with food, right? So I ask them to design their early memories of spaces that they've been to. Early memories of stories, like the most touching story in their life, to write about it. Writing and designing is really important for me as well. Describing, as you describe, you're getting the imagination and you start drawing and, the creative juices come out. So I recently I have translated that spatial experience, memory experience, to food innovation, where I ask students to think of the most delicious dish or the most memorable dish they ate, and the most disgusting dish they ate.
The two polar opposites.
Two polar opposites, exactly, because you want to get that extraordinary experience. We only remember the extraordinary, right?
Yeah.
So I wanted to get that extraordinary experience, the two, and why. Again, going back to the why is that important for them? And reason being is our memory is our identity, our subconscious. You don't realize you're doing things, but we do them all the time out of memory, And I wanted my students to be aware of that when they're designing, being aware of why they are designing the way they are.
Intentional, aware, critically reflective, in control of their own design process.
Yeah, and present with their design process. So knowing that if I had that disgusting dish in the past, how can I, if the brief is exactly that, how can I bring that experience, intentionally bring it to this design? Or what is the most memorable food experience I can offer people? So it could be that they had that dish with company. So the sensory experience of social glue is really important for that project. So going back to that memory.
This is funny enough the second time this week that somebody has reminded me that awful and awesome have the same root word.
Oh, there you go.
Two sides of the same coin.
It's the yin and the yang.
Exactly right. How did that change for your students? How did they react to that first memory or that design exercise? How does that trend?
Oh, it's painful. It's really painful for them, especially when you create, because we design with binary, right? So you have to have the light and the dark, and so this is what I try to bring in. But I feel that sometimes they do not want to remember, because sometimes the memory is associated with people that they don't want to remember, or with incidents or accidents or whatever. So it's extremely, I could feel them struggling. Some of them, they just go, oh yeah, we embrace it, and then they start writing. But other students, you have to be really careful with this exercise, because it can bring a lot of anxiety in students. So I keep my eye on them to make sure that they're okay when they're actually designing something like that, and talk to them.
Because it actually has to be guided and supported, because you are dealing with such heavy emotion.
Absolutely. I mean, we think about memory as really nice memories, but memories have a lot of associations with them. So when I'm introducing something like that, you really have to introduce it with care and make sure that you're not hurting anyone or people. And if they are remembering, then they're dealing with that memory right there.
What's something you always wish to impart on your students? What's a really core lesson for you to give over to them?
I feel that the most important lesson for the students is to believe in themselves. because they could be the best designers in the world. And if they don't believe that their design is worth something, they won't be able to sell it, and they will not be able to be good designers. So when I'm actually teaching my students, the first thing I teach my students is confidence. And I teach them that if once you've got the confidence, don't let anyone take that away from you.
That's so important.
Especially in the design course and architecture course, I think that's really important.
With vicious critique panels.
100%. So I prepare them for that. And I say, if you have knowledge behind you to defend you, to justify your design, then you should not fear any panel.
And if you can answer that why, you're coming from a place of strength.
And that's the knowledge will give them the confidence. And this is when they lean back on the research that they've done. If your research is strong, then your design will be strong. But number one thing I actually do teach them is believing in themselves.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Does someone ever teach you that, or it emerged on your own?
I think it's a combination. When I look back, I've had amazing mentors in my life, you know, from my design courses to my supervisors, my PhD supervisors. They were amazing, taught me how to write. But I think because when you've been traveling that much and doing so many things, you have to give yourself that pep talk sometimes. And when I think life just teaches you to believe in you, because no one else, if you don't believe in you, no one else will, you know. So yeah, I taught a combination of teaching that to myself, family, and professional mentors.
Who are some of these mentors? Who's really important for you from a precedent perspective, but also someone who still you're working closely with, or you really see as a contemporary?
Professionally, I would say my PhD supervisors, Jenny Lee and Linda Walker. They taught me how to write, and I still write in that style that they taught me how to write with clarity. And the research integrity also. So I owe it to them. There's also two mentors, Joe Seiss from Uni SA and Stephen Langdon, Swinburne University. They taught me leadership. So the amazing lessons that I'll never forget. Christian Galarin, of course, from l'École du Design, who taught me about leadership also. But also he believed in me. So I thought that was that's really beautiful. And of course, shout out to my sister Aya, not by blood, but sister by discipline and impact for good in Finland, who's the secretary of Cumulus Association. And she's extremely supportive, and we share many creative and innovative ideas for the Food Think Tank Working Group as well.
Amazing. So many good names and good people for us all to look up and have a look at that constellation. The phone lines are going off. We've just had a couple of text messages come in. The first one is, can you tell us about the work you've done around the intersection of architecture and food?
Oh, yeah. It's my favorite. I guess because of my background in interior architecture, I've looked at the spatial intersection between architecture and food, and the phenomenology of that sensory experience of architecture and combining it with the food experience. And it's not so much, creating nice restaurants or creating nice places, but how the actual space, the phenomenology of the space, how it contributes to create or to add value. So I'm translating from French to English, so just bear with me 1 second, because usually I describe it in French.
Trilingual life, listeners. Trilingual.
Painful. How to actually add value to savor that sensory experience and how the spatial experience makes food more tasty or tastier. So there's actually a research that's being done that when you are enjoying your food, your body absorbs the nutrition more. So because you're in a happier place, you're relaxed. So there's that. Also, when we actually look at architecture as a structure and the way that we innovate food, the way that we actually design architecture is form follows function, right? And you have the materiality, technology playing, experimentation with that, and that's the process that I actually follow with the food innovation. So I look at ingredients as material, not as ingredients. So when I'm designing with the students, we're not just designing products on a plate. We're designing within an architectural setting. We're designing within an urban setting and a spatial setting.
And a cultural setting.
Which creates the identity, as with architecture, creating the identity of a certain culture and nations, so does food innovation and food design.
Fantastic. Excellent question, texter. Thank you so much. They didn't leave their name. And another question we've had come in was from Mayor JDB, Jenna Davy Burns. Thank you so much for your text. Hi, Dolly and Ilana. Love your show and so great to hear Dolly's story. Question. If you could build any building in Kingston, what would you build?
Oh my God. It's from the mayor herself. By the way, hashtag guys, something I've started, JDB. Mayor JDB rocks. So thank you for that question. That is a very good question. I would actually build a food center for the entire community, different ages and different backgrounds, to show them the value of eating nutritional food, especially starting with kids, teaching them how to cook their food, where the food source comes from. It's not from the supermarket. And it would become like a community hub and a social glue for people to cook together and eat together.
Fantastic. There you go. There's a great idea for the next project, next Capital Works project for the City of Kingston. Love getting text messages in.
And having said that, also preserving our natural resources. So it would be good to actually have this in an open park somewhere.
I love the moment when you drive up Edithvale Road and you cross the underpass of the Frankston Freeway underpass, and then there's cows.
Yeah. How good is that?
And you're a stone's throw from the beach and a stone's throw from the town and the suburb and the civic centre. And then there's cows just right there.
I love these moments where, I always said that we actually live in a paradise. This is what I call Kingston. Because you look on one side and you've got the beautiful ocean. And by the way, we have so many different resources, fish resources that come, edible fish from the ocean. And then you look as you said, you look on the other side, you've got farmlands. And somehow they need to be connected. So for the good of the community. So we can, I'm not sure how, and actually I do. I have a strategy in mind of how to connect the two and create, a dynamic community, affordable food, accessible food for everyone. So, and by the way, I don't eat a lot. I talk about food a lot, but I don't eat a lot.
Are you able to summarize that strategy for us in a few minutes?
Yes. My strategy is healthy planets, or healthy communities come from healthy planets. If we want to be able to access these food resources that we have, we need farmers market. We need to know where the farms are, connect with the farmers, with their fresh produce, and bring the food to the community so they would buy it. The more people buy, the bigger the farms would become. And I'm not just talking about land clearing here. No, just existing farms that we have. We have so many fresh produce farms, for example, of olives. We have wineries around us. We have strawberries and berries, but none of us know where they are, right? We have to go searching for them on a long road, and hopefully they're open. Farmers market is a great way, and it's not just once a month that we can have that, but it would be a weekly market where we can go and get affordable fresh produce for the community. Another one is fisherman market as well. I mean, all the fish that we have here in the south, it gets sold in Vic Market and goes to the north. There's distribution costs. I'm not sure why. There must be a really good reason for that. There's distribution costs, and it's for us, we have to actually go to the northern side of Melbourne to get the fish when we can actually get it fresh from our oceans. So
sounds like a market hall component to this Kingston food centre that we're imagining.
100%. I think if we start with that, and educational programs for schools, health centers, about the systems of our food and where it's coming from, connecting to businesses, all of these fresh fruit produce, connecting it to businesses. So changing the menu from 10 different products that are fried to fresh produce that people can eat. I think that would increase the health of the community drastically and minimize pressure on the resources as well. Absolutely.
Here. I'm mindful of the time, so I do want to ask my last question. And that's, what gives you hope?
What gives me hope? That's a very good question. A lot of things give me hope. I think if we look at hope as associated with joy, because this is what you feel, right? When you're hopeful, you're in joy. And every single second that I live in my life, there is hope. That's why we're here. Nature gives me hope. For example, the youth awards that I went to yesterday, all these amazing, young humans doing amazing things, that gives me hope. Just the fact that we are still existing and the planet's still here and we're still going, and that's another hopeful thing. And life in general gives me hope. Not just my life, just the entire life, the entire way that the actual planet is the universe is constructed. If you think about it, we are just like one little dot in that universe. Yeah. And for us to exist and be happy and live this incredible life, that is pretty hopeful.
A wonderful note to end on. Thank you so much for joining me on the program, Dr. Dolly Daou.
Thank you. Thank you, Ilana.
Thanks for joining me for another evening of Radio Architecture with Ilana Razbash. This live show was broadcast and recorded in the Radio Karim studio on Bunurong Country. You can replay the show wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for tuning in and supporting community radio. Take care.
It's Nina and Amla on Radio Karim. Listen to the music they're playing for your ears. So tune in to Radio